My parents kicked me out with nothing but a suitcase. But the old metal card my grandpa gave me held $1 billion secret they never saw coming. And that was the day my revenge began. You want to know what betrayal really feels like? It's not just the knife in your back. It's watching the people who are supposed to love you twist it with a smile on their faces. I'm Lena Harrow, and this is the story of how my own parents tried to erase me from existence, and how my grandfather's final gift turned their perfect plan into the worst nightmare of their lives. It started with what they called a family reconciliation dinner. After months of tension and arguments about the direction of the family business, my mother called me with tears in her voice, begging me to come home to our coastal estate. "We miss you, Lena," she said. "Your father and I want to make things right. We've been too hard on you, too controlling. Come home, sweetheart. Let's fix this as a family." God, I was such an idiot. I actually believed them. I drove up that familiar winding driveway, past the manicured gardens and the fountain my grandfather had installed when I was little. The house looked exactly the same. Massive stone walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the ocean. The kind of old money elegance that screams, "We've been rich for generations." Walking up those marble steps, I felt hopeful for the first time in months. Maybe we could actually work through our differences. Maybe they finally understood that I had my own vision for the company, my own ideas about how to run things ethically. I should have known better when I saw the lawyers waiting in the dining room. "Lena," my father said, standing behind his chair like he was holding court, "we need to discuss your future with this family." That's when I knew. The formal tone, the way my mother couldn't meet my eyes, the stack of papers on the table. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner. This was an execution. "We've decided," my mother said, finally looking up with eyes colder than I'd ever seen them, "that you're no longer a good fit for this family or our business interests." The words hit me like a physical blow. No longer a good fit for my own family? "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice already shaking. My father slid a thick folder across the table. "Financial separation agreement. You sign this, you get a modest settlement, and you walk away from the family business permanently. No voting rights, no inheritance claims, no connection to the Harrow name in any business capacity." I opened the folder with trembling hands. The modest settlement was insulting. Barely enough to rent a decent apartment for a year. Everything else, everything I'd worked for, everything I thought was mine by birthright, would belong to them completely. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Oh, we're very serious," my mother said. "You've become a liability, Lena. Your ideas about ethical business practices and transparency are naive and dangerous. You don't understand how the real world works. This is my family. This is my inheritance." My father laughed. Actually, laughed. "Your inheritance? Sweetheart, you don't inherit anything unless we say you do. And we're saying you don't." That's when they showed me just how deep their cruelty ran. "Your bank accounts have been frozen," my mother said, checking something on her phone like she was reading the weather. "Turns out there were some irregularities in your financial history that needed investigation." I grabbed my phone, opened my banking app. Accounts suspended. All of them. My checking, my savings, even the emergency fund I'd built up since college. All locked. "What irregularities? What are you talking about?" "Your access badge at the office has been deactivated," my father continued. "Security escorted your personal belongings to your car this afternoon. Or rather, to my car, since it's registered in my name." He held up my car keys, dangling them like he was teasing a child. The GPS tracking shows it's been remotely locked. You won't be driving it home tonight. The room started spinning. In the span of 5 minutes, they had cut me off from my money, my job, my transportation, everything that made me an independent adult. How is this legal? I demanded. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Miss Harrow, your parents have been quite thorough. The accounts were flagged for suspicious activity, large transfers that coincided with certain business decisions you influenced. Your employment was terminated for cause insubordination in violation of confidentiality agreements. The vehicle was always registered to your father, so he has every right to reclaim it. What large transfers? What violations? You're making this up. My mother stood up, smoothing her designer dress. Lena, you're being hysterical. This is exactly why we can't trust you with family responsibilities. You're too emotional, too unstable. I'm not unstable. You're stealing my life. We're not stealing anything, my father said. We're protecting our family's interests. You can sign the separation agreement and leave with some dignity, or you can fight us and leave with nothing. Your choice. I looked around that dining room, the room where we'd celebrated every birthday, every holiday, every family milestone, and realized I was staring at strangers. These people who raised me, who claimed to love me, had planned this ambush with the cold precision of a corporate hostile takeover. I'm not signing anything, I said. My father nodded to one of the lawyers, who pulled out his phone. Then you have 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and leave the property. After that, you'll be considered trespassing. 10 minutes. They gave me 10 minutes to pack a life. I stumbled up to my childhood bedroom, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip my suitcase. I threw in whatever I could grab. Clothes, a few photos, some jewelry my grandmother had given me. Everything else, every memory, every piece of my identity tied to this place, I had to leave behind. When I came back downstairs, my mother was waiting by the door with an envelope. What's this? I asked. Emergency cash, she said. $500. Don't say we left you with nothing. $500. That was their idea of mercy. I was about to walk out when she stopped me. Oh, and Lena, if you're thinking about going to the media or trying to cause trouble for us, I wouldn't recommend it. We've already taken precautions. What kind of precautions? She smiled. The same smile she used to give me when I was little, and she was teaching me how to be proper, how to be a lady. Let's just say your reputation in this town isn't what it used to be. I didn't understand what she meant then. I would, soon enough. Standing on the front porch of the house where I grew up, suitcase in one hand, envelope of cash in the other, I felt like I was drowning. The security guard, someone I'd known since I was a teenager, wouldn't even look at me as he escorted me to the gate. I walked down that long driveway in the dark, my heels clicking on the pavement, and I swear I could hear my parents laughing through the windows behind me. But as I reached for my phone to call a cab, my fingers found something in my jacket pocket, something cold and metal that I'd forgotten was there. It was an access card my grandfather had given me years ago, just before he died. I remembered the moment clearly now. I was 16, and he'd pulled me aside at his birthday party. Lena, he'd said, pressing this thick metal card into my palm, keep this safe. Hide it somewhere your parents won't look. What is it, Grandpa? His eyes had gotten distant, sad. Insurance, he'd said, for the day the masks fall off. I'd never understood what he meant. The card was heavier than a normal credit card, made of some kind of steel, engraved with an unfamiliar crest and a serial number. I'd kept it all these years, moving it from wallet to wallet, thinking it was just a sentimental keepsake. Standing there in the dark, betrayed and broken, I wondered if my grandfather had somehow known this day would come. I called the one person I thought might still talk to me, my old college roommate, Maya. She picked up on the third ring. "Lena, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" I started crying right there on the phone. "Maya, I need help. My parents, they kicked me out. They froze my accounts. I have nowhere to go. Oh my God. Come over right now. I'll make up the couch." Maya lived in a cramped studio apartment downtown, the kind of place I used to think was charming when I was slumming it in college. That night, it felt like a palace because it was the only place in the world where someone still wanted me. I told her everything. The dinner, the lawyers, the systematic destruction of my independence. Maya listened with growing horror. "This is insane," she said. "Can they really do all that? Just cut you off completely?" Apparently they can, and they did. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about my grandfather's card, turning it over in my hands. What had he meant about insurance? What masks was he talking about? The next morning, I found out exactly what my mother had meant about precautions. I started calling everyone I knew, looking for work, looking for help, looking for anyone who would believe my side of the story. The responses were all variations of the same theme. "I'm sorry, Lena, but we can't help you right now. Maybe in a few months when things calm down." When things calm down? What things? Then I talked to Derek, a guy I dated briefly, who worked at one of the city's major consulting firms. "Lena, I'm going to be straight with you," he said. "There are rumors going around. People are saying you had some kind of breakdown, that you stole confidential files from your family's company, that you're not stable." My blood turned to ice. What kind of rumors? Look, I don't believe them. But word is, you've been added to some kind of financial risk registry. Companies are being advised not to hire you until there's been a full investigation. A financial risk registry. I'd never heard of such a thing, but it sounded official enough to scare HR departments. "Derek, who's spreading these rumors?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I can't prove anything, but the first person I heard it from said they got it from someone at Harrow Industries, someone close to the family. My own mother was destroying my reputation, systematically and professionally. She wasn't content to just kick me out. She wanted to make sure I couldn't land anywhere." That afternoon, Maya came home from work with a grim expression. "We need to talk," she said. She sat down across from me and pulled out her laptop. "I did some digging. There's a debt collection notice that came up when I searched your name. $43,000 to something called Pacific Credit Solutions. That's impossible. I've never taken out a loan with anyone called Pacific Credit. The debt is tied to your Social Security number. It says you defaulted on educational financing and business development loans." She showed me the screen. There it was, in black and white. A debt I'd never incurred, with my Social Security number attached, filed just 3 days ago, the day after my parents kicked me out. "They're framing me," I whispered. "They're actually framing me. Lena, this is beyond family drama. This is criminal." That night, I sat on Maya's couch, staring at my grandfather's metal card and feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My parents hadn't just disowned me. They were systematically destroying any possibility of me rebuilding my life independently. Every door I tried to open, they had already poisoned against me. But my grandfather had given me this card for a reason. For the day the masks fall off, Well, the masks were definitely off now. I grabbed Maya's laptop and started researching the crest engraved on the card. It took hours of digging through obscure financial websites and old business registries. But finally, I found it. Northbridge Vault Consortium. The name sent chills down my spine. I'd heard whispers about Northbridge in business school. They were like the financial world's most exclusive secret society. A private wealth network that served old industrial families. The kind of people who had been rich for so long, they'd forgotten what it felt like to worry about money. According to what little information I could find online, Northbridge specialized in off-record inheritance structures and generational wealth preservation. They operated by invitation only, with just 3 locations worldwide. One of them was downtown, in an unmarked building that most people probably walked past every day without knowing what it was. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces as they destroyed my life. But mixed with the anger was something else. Hope. My grandfather had been a careful man, a strategic man. If he'd left me something with Northbridge, it wasn't an accident. The next morning, I put on my nicest remaining outfit and took the bus downtown. The Northbridge building was exactly what I'd expected. Old stone, brass fixtures, the kind of understated elegance that whispered money instead of shouting it. There was no sign, no indication of what went on inside, just an address and a door that looked like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I stood outside for 10 minutes, gathering courage. What if this was just a wild goose chase? What if my grandfather's card was nothing more than a piece of sentimental junk? But then, I thought about my parents laughing as they destroyed my life, and I pushed open that heavy door. The lobby looked like something out of a different century. Marble floors, oil paintings of stern-looking men in expensive suits, furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. A receptionist, who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, looked up from her desk. "May I help you?" I held up the metal card, my hand trembling slightly. "I have this. My grandfather gave it to me." Her expression changed instantly. The polite but distant smile vanished, replaced by something like shock. "One moment, please," she said. Reaching for her phone, she spoke in hushed tones to someone, then hung up and gestured toward a sitting area. "Someone will be with you shortly." Shortly turned out to be less than 2 minutes. A man in an immaculate suit appeared, looked at the card in my hand, and his eyes went wide. "Miss Harrow," he said, "we've been expecting you." Expecting me? My grandfather had been dead for 3 years. He led me through corridors lined with portraits and into an office that looked like something from a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows, antique furniture, and technology so seamlessly integrated you barely noticed it. "I'm James Morrison, Senior Trust Administrator," he said. "May I see your identification and the access card?" I handed over my driver's license and the metal card. He fed both into some kind of scanning device, then asked me to place my palm on a biometric reader. "Security protocol," he explained. "Your grandfather was very specific about verification requirements." The machine beeped, and Morrison's computer screen lit up with information. His face went pale. "Ms. Harrow," he said slowly, "are you aware of the nature of your grandfather's holdings with this institution?" "I don't know anything," I said. "He just told me to keep the card safe." Morrison turned his screen toward me, and my world exploded. The number at the top of the screen had so many digits, I had to count them twice to believe what I was seeing. $1,073,462,815. $1 billion. My grandfather, the man who'd always seemed comfortable, but not extravagantly wealthy, had left me over $1 billion. This can't be real, I whispered. I assure you, it's very real, Morrison said. But it's more than just money, Ms. Harrow. Your grandfather created what we call a legacy portfolio. You now have voting rights in 12 different infrastructure boards, ownership shares in international shipping lanes, and majority control of the Harrow Research Foundation. He handed me a folder thick with documents. There's also this. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting, sealed until now. My dear Lena, if you're reading this, then the day I've feared for years has finally come. Your parents have shown their true nature. I've watched them for decades, and I've seen the corruption growing like a cancer. They think they're clever, but they've forgotten that I built the foundation they're standing on. I know about the forged compliance records, the leveraged non-existent assets, the falsified environmental permits. I know about the money they've been laundering through foreign property grants. Most importantly, I know they would try to destroy you if you ever threatened their control. That's why I created this legacy for you. Not just money, but power, real power. Everything they think they own, everything they've built their empire on, is actually controlled by the foundations and boards you now control. They've been playing chess, while I've been playing a different game entirely. Use this wisely, my dear granddaughter. They tried to bury you, but they forgot that I already dug you out. All my love, grandfather. I read the letter 3 times before the full implications hit me. My grandfather hadn't just left me money. He'd left me the keys to my parents' kingdom. Mr. Morrison, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in days. I need to understand exactly what kind of power I have here. Over the next hour, Morrison walked me through the portfolio. It was breathtaking in its scope and strategic brilliance. My grandfather had spent decades quietly acquiring controlling interests in the infrastructure and regulatory bodies that my parents' businesses depended on. The shipping lanes their real estate developments needed for materials, I controlled them. The environmental boards that approved their construction permits, I had majority voting power. The research foundation that provided the studies they used to justify their projects, I owned it. My parents had built their empire on a foundation my grandfather controlled, and now I controlled it. But Morrison had more news for me. Ms. Harrow, there's something else you should know. We've been monitoring your situation, as per your grandfather's instructions. We're aware of the recent difficulties with your family. He pulled up another screen. We've also been tracking some irregularities in your parents' business activities that your grandfather suspected but could never prove. The screen showed a complex web of financial transactions, shell companies, and forged documents. It was everything my grandfather had suspected, and more. Your parents have been engaging in systematic fraud, Morrison said. But more than that, they've been setting you up to take the fall for it. He showed me documents that made my blood run cold. My parents hadn't just kicked me out and destroyed my reputation. They were preparing to frame me for their crimes. The mysterious debt, the rumors about my mental state, the allegations of stolen files. It was all preparation for making me their scapegoat. There's a federal investigation starting next week, Morrison said. Your parents think they've covered their tracks, but they've actually left a trail that leads directly to you. Unless someone intervenes. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. What kind of intervention? Morrison smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Your grandfather was very specific about that too. He called it the Transparency Directive. That evening, I didn't go back to Maya's apartment. Morrison had arranged for me to stay in a discreet suite while I planned my next moves. I spent the night reading through my grandfather's files, understanding the full scope of what he'd left me. But more than that, I was planning. My parents thought they'd destroyed me, but they'd actually just freed me from any obligation to protect them. I hired 3 people that week. First, a cyber forensics specialist named Alex Chen, someone who could trace every digital manipulation my parents had made to frame me. Second, a trust litigator named Sarah Rodriguez, who specialized in dismantling corrupt family dynasties. Her reputation was legendary. She'd brought down 3 major families in the past 5 years. Third, a crisis management operative named David Park, who could restore reputations and identities that had been deliberately destroyed. I also established my own company, Harrow Integrity Syndicate, an investigative compliance firm with one mission: exposing the truth about my family's crimes. The beautiful thing about having $1 billion is that you can afford the best people, and the best people work fast. Within a week, Alex had traced every falsified document, every planted debt, every rumor back to its source. Sarah had filed preliminary injunctions to freeze my parents' ability to transfer assets or manipulate records. And David had begun the process of systematically destroying the lies my parents had spread about me. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment, the moment when my parents would be most vulnerable and the truth would have maximum impact. That moment came 3 weeks later. Harrow Industries was holding its annual shareholder summit. The biggest investors, the most important partners, the financial media. Everyone who mattered in my parents' world would be there. My parents had been telling people that the summit would address recent family challenges and restructuring for stability. They were planning to use the event to publicly distance themselves from me and solidify their control. I had other plans. The summit was held in the ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. 500 people in expensive suits, discussing millions of dollars, like other people discussed lunch plans. I watched from the lobby as my parents worked the room, shaking hands, making promises, playing the part of the successful family business leaders. They had no idea I was there. I'd changed my appearance slightly. Different hair, different clothes, different makeup. To anyone who didn't know me well, I looked like just another financial professional attending the summit. When my parents took the stage to begin their presentation, I activated my grandfather's final gift. The transparency directive wasn't just a plan. It was a technological system my grandfather had built into the very infrastructure of the hotel. With the metal access card and a secure connection, I could override the presentation system and display whatever I wanted on every screen in the building. My mother was in the middle of talking about family values and generational responsibility when every screen in the ballroom suddenly went black. Then the documents started appearing. Forged environmental impact statements, shell companies with my parents' signatures, money transfers to offshore accounts, emails discussing how to frame me for their crimes, and in the center of it all, a message in my grandfather's handwriting. The masks have fallen off. The room erupted in chaos. 500 people scrambling to understand what they were seeing, pulling out their phones to photograph the screens, talking over each other in shock and anger. My father tried to regain control of the microphone, but it was too late. More documents appeared. Correspondence with the fake debt collection agency, instructions to spread rumors about my mental state, plans to use me as a scapegoat for federal investigators. Then the audio started playing. It was a recording from the night they kicked me out. Captured by security cameras, my parents didn't know my grandfather had access to. Their own voices, clear as day, discussing how they were going to destroy me. She'll never recover from this. My mother's voice said through the speakers. By the time we're done, no one will believe anything she says. And if the federal investigation gets too close, she'll take the fall. My father's voice added, We've made sure of that. I stood up in the back of the room, and slowly, people began to notice me. Whispers rippled through the crowd as they realized who I was. The daughter who was supposed to be discredited, unstable, and powerless. Instead, I walked calmly to the stage, where my parents stood frozen in horror. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father, I said into the microphone. Surprised to see me? My mother's face had gone completely white. Lena, you don't understand what you're doing. This is all taken out of context. Really? Which part was taken out of context? The part where you forged environmental permits? The part where you planted false debts in my name? Or the part where you planned to let me go to federal prison for crimes you committed? I gestured to the screens, where more evidence was still appearing. These are your signatures, your voices, your crimes. There's no context that makes any of this acceptable. The audience was dead silent now, everyone straining to hear every word. For 3 weeks, you've been telling people I was unstable, that I was a liability to this family. But the truth is, you were afraid of me. You were afraid I'd discover what you've been doing, afraid I'd stop you from destroying everything my grandfather built. I pulled out the metal access card, holding it up so everyone could see. My grandfather knew this day would come. He knew you'd try to bury me when I threatened your corruption, so he made sure I had the tools to dig myself out. That's when the federal agents walked into the room. I'd been working with Sarah Rodriguez to coordinate with the investigation. When the evidence of my parents' crimes became undeniable, the agents moved fast. Richard and Patricia Harrow, the lead agent announced. You're under arrest for corporate fraud, environmental violations, money laundering, and conspiracy. The handcuffs clicked closed around my parents' wrists right there on the stage, in front of 500 witnesses and a dozen cameras. My mother looked at me with more hatred than I'd ever seen in another human being. You vindictive little bitch, she hissed. You've destroyed everything. No, I said calmly. You destroyed everything. I'm just cleaning up the mess. As they were led away, the lead agent turned to me. Ms. Harrow, we'll need your testimony, but I want you to know, without the evidence you provided, they might have gotten away with all of this, and you might have taken the fall. The room was chaos after that. Reporters shouting questions, investors demanding answers, board members trying to figure out what this meant for the company. But I felt calm for the first time in months. Over the next few days, the full scope of my parents' crimes came to light. Asset seizures, freeze orders, criminal charges. Their empire collapsed completely. The board of Harrow Industries voted unanimously to remove them from all positions and to install me as interim CEO while they sorted out the legal mess. I accepted, but only temporarily. I had bigger plans. Using my grandfather's legacy portfolio, I restructured the company from the ground up. Harrow Northbridge Group became a model of ethical business practices, transparent accounting, environmental responsibility, fair labor practices, everything my parents had opposed. I offered reinstatement and compensation to every employee who had been harmed by my parents' corruption. I funded cleanup projects for the environmental damage they'd caused. I opened the company's books to public scrutiny and invited oversight from ethics organizations. Most importantly, I used my new wealth and power to help other people who'd been victimized by corrupt family businesses. The Harrow Justice Initiative became a foundation dedicated to exposing and stopping the kind of systematic abuse I'd experienced. My parents are serving 10-year sentences in federal prison. They lost everything: their money, their company, their reputation, their freedom. The judge said their case was one of the most egregious examples of family financial abuse she'd ever seen. Sometimes I think about visiting them. Sometimes I wonder if they understand what they did to me, if they feel any remorse for destroying their own daughter to protect their crimes. But then I remember the look in my mother's eyes as she called me a vindictive bitch, and I know they'd do it all again if they could. So I don't visit. I don't call. I don't think about them unless I have to. Instead, I think about my grandfather and how he spent years secretly building the tools I'd need to survive their betrayal. I think about the metal card that saved my life and gave me the power to save others. And I think about justice, real justice, not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that comes from truth. My parents tried to bury me, but they forgot something important. I come from strong roots. My grandfather made sure of that. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? What would you do if you found a billion-dollar card in your pocket after being kicked out by your own family? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if you believe in justice and accountability, then like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about fighting back against corruption and abuse. Because the truth is, there are predators in every family, every business, every community. They count on their victims staying silent, staying ashamed, staying powerless. But sometimes, just sometimes, the victims have hidden strengths the predators never saw coming. And that's when the real justice begins.